There is a primal scream rising on this planet, and as many would argue, from this planet. Think of it as a boiling point of pain and disconnection, a culmination of disappointment, if you will, that we are unwilling, or even more concerning, that we are incapable of closing the gap between knowing better and doing better. In my work with young people, I hear a common refrain: I'm not suicidal, but I'm not sure I want to be here anymore. This is a clarion call that something's got to give. The New York Times refers to this slow death of the human condition as a pandemic of loneliness. Mental health practitioners refer to it as a crisis of global proportions, leading to ever-increasing rates of suicide, self-harm, addictions of all sorts, violence against others, and a population increasingly dependent on mood-stabilizing drugs just to function. Bottom line, we are struggling to exist in a world our nervous systems were not designed for. To exist in a perpetual state of fight or flight is the greatest theft of our human experience. We're being robbed of our potential to live a life of peace and harmony. Is there a way out of this path of self-annihilation and mutual destruction? I believe there is. My hypothesis is that if we are willing to go to school on our wounding, to remove shame and blame from our past, to find grace in all that has come before, and, with even greater courage, apply a lens of love to the present moment, our future can be radically and beautifully different from our past. Our failure to learn from our past forever binds us to the suffering of our ancestors. Our inability to meet this pain with compassion and wisdom is a key point of frustration for many. That frustration is the catalyst for this podcast. The Primal Scream podcast is an ongoing conversation with ordinary folks who have met their primal scream head on and turned it into a powerful catalyst for change in their lives. They've stepped away from the performative expectations placed on them by their family and/or society, despite encountering resistance from within and external constraints along the way, leaving behind both the trauma of their story and the trauma drama that often ensues. Change is hard, but as these beautiful humans share their stories, we learn the intimacy of change is the opening to a life well lived. If you are feeling the existential dread of being alive on the planet at this time, you are not alone. If you're exhausted by the simple act of just being here, you are not alone. As you listen to these storytellers reveal their raw and real journeys to wholeness, it is our hope that you will find courage to do the same. Is there one message to take away from each of these podcasts? I believe there is, and it is simply this: you are not crazy, and you are not alone. Hi, welcome back to Primal Scream Podcast with Stevie Osborne, and I am here with my dear sister, Angelina DeWeese. I think I came up with this idea for podcast just so that I could set aside very specific time with all of my favorite people to go deep on the questions that we already are sort of dancing around, and to narrow that focus to the concept of primal scream has been just such an illuminating conversation for me. My initial inquiry was, is this a messenger? Is this an invitation to recognize we've had enough? Like the primal scream feels like it's an enough moment. We can't be who we once were anymore. We don't have it in us. So that's what it means to me. I wonder, Angelina, what does
Well,
primal scream sort of conjure in your thinking and feeling and awareness in your own history as you look at it through the lens of primal invitations?
Mm,
Where does that land for you?
I love really good questions, as you know. And, when I think of primal, I think of like the deep belly of our most wild, like selves. Imagine like dirt everywhere and just feet
Feral,
on the
totally
ground, and that
feral
place
humans,
of
right?
Ah,
Yes, just like, "Take me if you want, I don't care what you want me to be like," right? And it's such a complete dichotomy to the way that we are cultured.
condition.
We are cultured to conditioned, yes, to be nice, pretty,
Y-
um, apologetic, right? And so the the pendulum of being that for so long until we've had enough, for me, brings about the primal scream in that place of wild abandon and reclaiming what is most important to you in your own values. And for me, I think of primal scream, I think of anger, like
Right,
rage and the ferocity of I can no longer contain all of the things that do not
right.
feel aligned, right? Just that fierce scream of your soul ready to just get uncaged and unhinged and to try its damnedest to be front and center, and get rid of all the other masks and stuff.
I want as I listen to your language and I love it, every bit of it. I get a very young version of you, claiming
Mm.
something back from that conditioned
Mm.
environment. Does that make sense? Like a
Yeah.
very deep
Oh
place that
yeah.
says,
Yeah.
enough. And I wonder if we lost our access to when we lost our access to our innocence, that's where the starting point of that primal scream and it just builds and builds and builds until some point in our lives where we just the little inner child says enough. We've been faking it and go along to get along and people pleasing and supporting a structure that doesn't support us. We can't do this
Yeah.
anymore. Um, so,
Yeah. And there can be, I know from my life when I look, there are like many moments, right, where the primal scream just came and was like, no more, of this. And then there was the next one and the next one. And for me, it wasn't this like grand primal scream that changed everything forever, but it was really a gradual, continual letting go.
somebody asked me about this story again just last night, so I think it's in the field for a reason. I've always been fascinated with butterflies. It's kind of my iconography. I love butterflies and just the whole
Mm.
mythology of going from caterpillar to butterfly that um I've always been fascinated by the metamorphic cocooning of, the old story breaking down into nothing and then the imaginal buds coming into something new. But I learned something more about the path as a caterpillar that was really metaphorically true for me as well, that species, depending on, will shed skin 3 to 5 times before they ever go into the cocoon. So the
Mm.
caterpillar is born with this voracious appetite to eat and eat and eat and consume, and it outstretches its current skin, and then it has to shed that skin, and then it's ready to be more of a caterpillar and more consumption, and then it gets too big for that skin, and it sheds that skin, and it does that 3 to 5
Mm.
cycles before it finally says, "We just can't ouch, we're not meant to be a caterpillar at all anymore. Oh my god, what are we meant to be? What does this mean?" And you go into the deep cocoon where the whole old story collapses into this primordial goo, and only the imaginal buds, only the stem cells of our imagination are left. And through that lens, where we don't know what's coming next, but we're willing to, my favorite quote is, "If I must fall, let me fall, for who I will become will catch me." And people, I repeat that over and over again because it feels like such a truth bomb when you're it's a big leap into the abyss of you. You don't know. You've been everybody other than you to varying degrees your whole life. So it sounds like it didn't all happen at once. And I think we shed a skin and then we have a bigger view of ourselves. We shed another skin and we have a bigger view. And pretty soon you shed the last of your skins and you realize, oh, there's a death of me in this.
Mm.
And
Mhm.
the fear of
Absolutely.
that death keeps so many people in that tension of potentiality. And, the shame core brings it. Who are you to dare? You could think that you're more than a caterpillar. How dare you, right? And then we internalize that messaging to the point where we gaslight ourselves. We don't trust our beauty and our
Yeah.
magic as it's unfolding before us. And sometimes that big fall happens with the death of a loved one. It can happen with a cancer diagnosis. It can happen with a change of career. I know you went through a huge drop. Maybe drop in there. Like, what are the skins you shed, and what was the cocoon you entered?
Oh, yes. Well, the first initial kind of skin before even the time that we left our home and sold all our belongings and went on the road. Before that, when I was a teenager, kind of groomed to be a perfect, I would get $100 for every A and always had new clothes and, spoiled. And, but really the spoiled came with a price. You had to look a certain way and be a certain way to just keep getting things. And I got to like my teenage years, I was really smart. But I was so uncomfortable in my
Yeah.
own skin. And I remember starting to smoke weed and then moving on to other drugs. And I got to a place where no one in my life knew, except for a few friends, that I was snorting cocaine in the evenings, doing all kinds of drugs. I even found myself one time in the chief police officer in our area. He was, somehow I found myself on a break. I was a restaurant server and I ended up at his house and he had no furniture in his house. And he said, you want to snort some crack? And I was like, why not? I got nothing else to do today. And so we are, doing some crack and looking around. And I'm like, oh, this sucks. Like, this feels terrible. Right. But there was so much misalignment in myself that I kept saying yes to whatever was in my field. Like, anyone who knows me knows I am a yes. I really love to show up and in that time where I wasn't following my soul's path, I was a yes to most things that came in my field. And so um I remember one night I had that night we won't tell the rest of that story, but we'll just say that it ended really badly that night. Um, and kind of the biggest primal scream at this time in my life was I ended up having an all-nighter, found some drug dealers, made really good friends with them, um, did a lot of things that I am not proud of to get as much drugs as I could, and woke up in one of their bedrooms and just mortified. Like, what did I do? Where am I? And so I started to drive myself home. And it was an icy day and not good to be driving when you haven't slept and have done a lot of things overnight. And I got into a really bad car accident and smashed and totaled my car into the ice. And I was so out of it that I didn't even realize that I had totaled my car. I tried to back up, but the whole front end of my car was gone. And I remember getting out of the car and I took this 24 pack of beer and I threw it over the overpass down to oncoming traffic. Now, looking later, the person I am now would just be like, how could you do that? How could you be that kind of person that's so irresponsible that could have hurt people? In that time in my life, really had no concept or consciousness of anyone else.
Like, can I
Um,
just point at
and
what you're
yeah, yeah,
describing, and I love your honesty and vulnerability here. Thank you for being so present to the quest of this conversation. When you are that separated from self, you are also separated from everything around you. And when I see
yeah,
people doing unconscious acts around, I know that the disconnection is deeper from within than we even realize. Like, you can't treat other people poorly, make decisions that are going to hurt other people when you are connected to yourself, because you become aware how much
Yeah.
we are connected to each other. It's when we're
Yeah.
disconnected from self that we also lose our connections to our humanity. And so this is
Yeah.
a global theme, um, right now, that is, in my view, bringing about this energy, this collective primal scream. And that's why these conversations are so important, is to help people really relate to what they're feeling. This anger, this rage, this disconnection is not acceptable anymore.
Mhm.
So there you are, and you have invited in illicit drugs, a car accident, bad choices with nice drug dealers. Often they are very nice people
Mm.
struggling with their own disconnection issues, right?
Mhm.
And trying to
Mhm.
figure out how to pay for their own habits. Um, I, I,
Yeah.
I I have a whole different story about a conversation with a full-on drug dealer one time, and that'll say for another day. But here we are, trying on a skin, and it doesn't work for us.
Yeah, yeah, it's a skin that is it was very disconnected from the truth of my soul, and I think that this happens a lot in our youth. I see it a lot with this, that age group of really looking towards everyone else for validation. What should I look like? What should I
Right.
do? How should I win at this game? And to be disconnected from our soul is really when we begin to get ourselves in these
Yeah.
kind of situations. And that, was the first time my family found out. They found all my paraphernalia, and my mom kindly locked me in my room for 5 days, and she kept bringing food. And she says, "You're going to stay in here for 5 days and just think and detox." And I remember it being very,
Uh,
very painful to be exposed, to be seen for that side of my shadow self, because everyone had always thought I was perfect, and then to be seen for this underbelly of what was really going on inside felt so vulnerable. And I think that's why a lot of people don't
yeah.
want to admit whenever they're living in those ways, because then the mask, the illusion, that bubble
Right.
gets burst, and you're there and you're really in your humanity. Um, and so that was, really after that, I vowed to never do drugs again. It was just like that. I saw myself, I saw the whole movie script of what I was doing. And I was kind of reflecting earlier when I was going through some of your questions to prepare. I thought, what was it that like had me be willing to see the
Uh,
movie script? I don't know what it was. There was a knowing, a deeper knowing, when I wasn't, and it probably was due to the fact that I had to stay in my room for 5 days and stay in that stillness and be with myself. I really believe that stillness is one of the places that we can um, reflect and feel what's really there. When we're busy and not
Find
being
the
in stillness, it's very
distractions.
easy,
Wherever you go,
totally
there you
easy to
are.
just.
Yeah.
That's right. I mean, I had 2 jobs, I was going to school, there was really no time to question my actions, but being in that stillness, yes, you question it. And so, that was as soon as I decided I'm not going to be doing drugs anymore, I was in school and I was doing this, I had just signed up, of course, as coincidence happened or not. I had just signed up for this spirituality and journal keeping course, led by this woman who was an ordained minister, which at that time was very rare. And she was so lovely. And I shared in one of our papers that I had just made this discovery. And so she, kindly sent me to the counselor and had me have this whole conversation. And they invited me into, some drug rehab programs. And I said, nope, I don't need drug rehab programs. I'm going to choose to quit. And they said, well, that's very rare. And I was like, well, I don't care what you think. This is what I'm doing. And I promised to stay in her course. And that really set me on this track of our assignments were to write every day for 30 minutes. And so I was keeping a journal every day, really checking in again, that like
Yeah.
reflection point. And after 3 months, she gave us an awesome assignment. You're going to love this. the assignment was to imagine you found this person's journal and you read it and you write about what their life is. What can you tell about this person? What's their character? And how do you
Fill out
feel
the
about this
scripts
person?
from these clues, character clues.
Oh
What a
my.
great question.
Yes. Oh my. Amazing question. And it took me about 5 days to write this because it was so difficult to actually allow myself to get again to this place where I was so
Yeah.
disgusted, right, by these behaviors. And these remind you, I was no longer doing drugs. This was just continuation of all the other pieces of myself at that time. Um, and that began a 4-year journey of doing her course. So I was in her course my entire college time, and we became very close friends. And she was one of my closest mentors and handholders in that time of just reading and witnessing. She never changed anything. And back to your story about the butterfly. One of my most wow moments of reading about a butterfly was this story of a farmer who had all of these chrysalis up, and he decided that it was too hard to
Mm,
watch. So he wanted to cut them open to let them free sooner. And it actually caused the chrysalis
collapse
to
and
die. And it was this moment of recognizing, oh, we don't need the savior. She wasn't my savior. She didn't reach into my life and actually come and have conversations with me. All she did was hold the space and witness my journey and my experience. And that is it. And that's all I needed to keep my energy in myself and to do the work that we all can do with ourselves.
in some of the other interviews, it's been interesting, and you just alluded to it, that when all you know is what you know from your family system, it sometimes takes an outside person, a mentor, a pattern interrupter, influencer. I had a couple of older women in my childhood that recognized some of the things that were happening in my household were not in my best interest. And
Mm.
minus their external witnessing of my life and helping me see myself not you mentioned the script part, help illuminate the script aspect of my life so that I became the narrator of my story rather than
Mm.
just an actor in my story, that I had a lot more agency. But it sometimes does take an outside reflection, somebody who sees our potentiality different than the script that we've been sort of oriented, conditioned to, and how powerfully important teachers are in kids' lives, those who go the extra mile to make that connection, to witness and say, this doesn't sound like the person I see in front of me. Let's identify script versus your truth. And you go, wait a minute, I get to have a truth. What is my I don't have to take on my parents' truth or society's truth. Like, oh shoot, this is a whole life story thing I get to unpack. And you got it at an earlier age, um that sort of set you in motion. It feels like this was really grounding for you. Is
Yeah. I think it was the first time that I'd ever been taught how to reflect, how to look in third person at myself or anyone. And it's a certain kind of level of consciousness to go outside of oneself, right? And then to look kind of from this above perspective. And in the age of, teenage and adolescence, it's so you are the only thing that exists. And I think that's wonderful. We do all need and want a time for that, right? But then what is the thing that breaks us out of that? It could be a big struggle like I had, or it could be simply beginning at a younger age of having more time of reflection, having more connection to oneself. And I always wonder what would it have been like had
yeah.
I been taught that, Now I teach my daughter that, and we talk about it a lot. And whenever she comes up with something that goes on, or she's feeling a lot of emotion, we go through feeling those emotions, and then um, really reflecting on what that means. And then I'm even teaching her to, like, go to your community, call people. This person's had that experience.
Yeah.
Talk to them about it, because I had wished that I had had these different resources that I now have learned since are really important when we're going through these places, because it can feel really
Exactly.
isolating,
My
and we can feel so ashamed of ourselves about these places
well,
we find ourselves, which,
we're acting
yeah,
out a script. We don't until we understand that
totally.
we are reacting to the setting of our arrival. We don't. Michael Singer wrote the book The Untethered Soul, and I always recommend this book to people who are just beginning to get to that place of inner reflection, that interiority,
Mm,
the spaciousness that is within, um, and to begin to trust that inner guidance system, that inner narrative, beyond the external messages that come at us. And he says it's the observer, right? There's the noise in your head, and some people, that's all they know is the noise, and especially young kids, like, "Oh, this feeling is going to kill me, like it's the death of me, they rejected me or whatever." I just remember that histrionics and drama as a child, and that carried over a lot into my young adult years. And then finally I got a sense of, oh, so there's the noise, but then as Singer says, ask yourself, who is listening to the noise, who is paying
mm,
attention to the noisy roommate in your head that's always taking you down a path that is not your own best interest. And so to help kids get to that observer mode much earlier. Oh, what kind of feelings are you having right now? Oh, those are really big feelings. How does that feel in your body? How do you move those feelings out of your body so that you don't internalize them? And I think of Goldie
yeah.
Hawn's work 25 years ago, starting with emotional intelligence for first graders, and how those kids have grown up on a completely different path than kids who don't have that gift of awareness of self, big S, being the guiding force in their life. Um, but we figured it out.
Mm,
Somehow we get there, right? And whenever we get
well,
there, it's the right time for us. So then what
mhm.
happens? You start to trust that inner voice, and you set different boundaries on your life, right? How does that show up in business? And I know you've done some major metamorphic shifts over the years.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, there's so many different shifts, I think, but, they're always coming to a place that I have felt some misalignment, right? And I definitely, there's a period of my life that I was really deep into self-help, and, I was, in landmark education for almost 10 years, and really looking at, uh, some of the ways that the distinctions of the ways that they teach, which ultimately the biggest takeaway was, life is happening for you, not to you, and really starting to source power from my own integrity, my own intention, my own words. And I think that was a revelation. But also taking responsibility for what it was. And that's something that I certainly didn't learn in my family, taking responsibility for what's going on around me. You mean I am creating this? Why would I want to create
Right.
this? And if then taking that to another level, if it's happening for me, well, what is it for? And so I had to really kind of dig into looking at life through the context of, like, spiritual evolution, that I finally came to this place of realizing, oh, we're not just here to, just do life in this 3D world, which is all really wonderful and can also be really hard, but we're here because we're here to evolve, to heal, and to grow our soul. Whatever that is for each person is different, that soul's journey. Um, and after all of that self-help and all of my hundreds of books that I read and countless hours of exhaustion and never feeling like enough, because certainly the self-help world, while I believe it's really empowering in some ways, there is a good percentage of it that's disempowering. Because for a good portion of my life, the thing that caused me to continue to go to so many courses and do all these workshops and all these different things was really the truth that I felt broken, that I needed to be fixed. And I don't really know that that wasn't true, but it certainly wasn't the most empowering context. Now looking back, I had wished that my question was more, what do I need to learn to continue to expand my range of being, right? So if I want to be more loving and to really go back through my past and forgive things that I saw that I wished had been different, um, what do I need to do? What skills, what tools, what people do I need to call on to open up that capacity? Right. And so I think it's just a slightly different context. But throughout all those years, where I ended up um, was, at one point in my career as a life coach and spiritual guide for women, I found myself, in this amazing business partnership, and we were reaching thousands of people doing, 600-person events. And it was just so exciting and so lit up. And yet there was still a part of me that didn't feel fulfilled. And I felt like that was really strange. I mean, there was twofold. One is that, I was kind of coming to this place where um, I felt the most inept in all of my most intimate relationships. And when it came to coaching and guiding others, I was like, I got this in the bag. I can talk all day. I can guide, but there was something that felt wrong, like out of integrity, that in my marriage and with my new children, I was struggling the most. And so it was kind of always eating. It was always there, like kind of eating at me, and I, of course, as it goes in life, these things kept coming into my awareness that were about relationships. I started getting all these relationship drama clients, and I thought, wow, this isn't a mirror. I don't know what is. And so I would find myself, talking about relationships and hearing all of the things that I really needed to be doing. I could very easily share them with other people, but when it came to actually doing them myself, it was much different and harder. And so I, you know, I think I also secretly desired more time with my kids, but I didn't know how to get it. And so what happens for me, and I think this happens for a lot of people when we're ignoring these sort of underbelly, like they're kind of like whispers, or you hear something in your mind. And I would hear, I would like to do more of this, or I'd like to do more of that. But then the other part of the mind shuts it down.
Right.
That for me, I always have gotten to this place where life just stops working when I don't listen. And I think this happens for a lot of people, although they could either look at it as in, this is happening to me, right? Like I'm a victim of this and I can't believe this is happening. And I can't believe my boss is such an asshole. And, I can't believe all these things. Or looking, am I just not asking the right question? Is there something else that wants me to have its attention?
I want to grab a hold of what there's an edge that I know people are dancing with, this place of flow. If you've ever been in this level of trust with this human experience, life is happening for me, therefore everything is fuel and curriculum for my growth. And and you start to trust the no's as an equal benefit of a yes, like, oh, I got turned down for that. Okay. Not meant for me. Where do I go next? Or really meant for me. There's an energy that comes up and goes, okay, wrong approach. Try something, like, go in a different, like, watch the breadcrumbs now start to lay out. When you give up your certainty of how things are supposed to go, you begin to find greater alignment with what is. And in that what isness, you find your ease of beingness, right? And yet I know that there have been times in my life where I have plowed ahead, a very toxic masculine aspect of my soul, not yet heals, is like, but I can make it happen, this ego investment of an outcome versus staying in the very feminine healed place for myself of trust and allow and take some pressure off of myself to perform a certain way that I'm enough just to show up and be in that state. This once you've experienced flow and then you are out of alignment again, there is less capacity to ignore that misalignment. Right? The noise gets a
Mhm.
little louder. In the beginning, it feels like, just whisper, go this way, go this, try this, try that, try that, trust this, trust this. Where the fuck do you think you're going? Get back here now. You know the way, and it's
Mhm.
to get out of the way of how it wants to unfold. And
Yeah. I think a really important key to that for me was letting go of all of my attachments. And so, whenever we think about allowing for flow, and you talked about this sort of masculine energy of driving forward, masculine energy of driving forward is rooted in
right,
not feeling
right.
safe, right? So we have to go and make it happen to feel the validation, to know that we can, or whatever the story is that we're telling ourselves. And so for me, that piece of starting to kind of question everything, like, wait, why do I need this house? Why do I need this kind of car? Why do I think, why have I set my life up like this? Right. And, some people call that the midlife crisis, I call it the
I
midlife
call it
soul
midlife
awakening.
revival. I love that.
Revival.
Yeah, like,
Yes.
oh, you're in the middle of a midlife revival. You're questioning everything. Good on you. That's healthy. That's appropriate. That's not something to be shamed or frightened away. It's a
Yeah.
self-initiation moment because we don't have our Western way does not have good initiatory practices into adulthood, into a motherhood, into
Mm-mm.
matronhood, into crone, into a king, into elder. We do not honor these important ritual transitions that we make, shedding of skins, of no more fucks to give could be
Mhm.
the equivalent of skins. We have a whole
Mhm.
language for this, but we struggle because of the expectations, the externalization of our expectations about how we're going to be seen. And this is where that word gasm I love to play with, self confidence versus self competence. In the beginning, my whole life was
Mm.
gaining self confidence. But then there came a
Mm.
point where I didn't care how I was perceived by anything out there. It was the self-competence that drew
Mm.
me deeper and deeper into what is my truth, what is my,
Mhm.
song to
Mhm.
sing in this story.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, and isn't that the hardest thing for most of us to even grapple with, is what is my thing? Who am I? What
And
is
where are
this?
my
And
permission
you
structures? Are
know,
they all out there, or have I found them in
mm,
here? Right? It's my
yeah,
agency.
yeah, I think that totally. And I now look back and see the times that they were out there, the things that I could look at that were actually showing me more of who I were the things that were exciting me, right? The things that were sort of lighting me up. The people who would come into my field and I would say, I wish I could be more like them, in my mind. Like, wow, look how happy and healthy and healed, and like, wow, that is just so different from what I'm experiencing, right? And so that that curiosity, being lit off of someone else's light, and that shifting jealousy and comparison to flipping it to saying, wow, I actually, if I'm honest, I want some of
The
that,
word
you
I
know?
love the word lit, and beneath that is a congruency of soul, that these people
Mm,
are operating from a level of congruency with their soul that I do not yet understand or have
yeah,
within me, but I recognize this
I
is a
can feel
thing,
it.
and they have unpacked this thing in a way that I have not yet done.
Yeah, and even more basic than that is just I remember when I was living in New York and I was working at the juice bar, and there was these women that would just walk down the street, and just their energy would take my breath away. And now looking back, what I can see is that those women were healthy, they were taking good care of themselves, they were connected to their passion, they looked like these most funky artists, just really living their
Yeah,
self-expression. And I think if we look like that at life, we'll see the things we're most excited by are actually our
yeah.
future selves that are saying, "Hey, this is you." Like, but we may
The
not.
beckoning and becoming
Yeah, I
becomes
mean, we
more and more real. Yes, yes.
yes, yes, we might not understand that in the moment, but there is a distinction between looking at someone's life and saying, "How dare you?" which keeps you further and more separate from that very thing, as to then flipping it and looking and saying, wow, how are you? How are you doing that? What did you do? And really opening to the
You just
curiosity.
unpack the mother
Um,
wound right there. But what you described, this
mm,
going from how dare they be so congruent? How, this energy
mm,
of jealousy and envy as a way of separating, but also as an invitation to look inside. Why am I so triggered by this person
mm,
living out such a beautiful, distinct pharaoh life for themselves? And when I got to this place, I realized I was living within the constraints of my mother's fears and
mm,
projecting onto all the women around. So this is the mother wound, the sister wound. We see sisters, women putting each other down. It's like, what? Where did that come from? Well,
mm,
we come by it naturally. Our mothers were very much colluded into the patriarchy that kept the feminine very small and very contained, or them as a mistake if they got too feral. Like we have a history with women becoming too feral and getting backlash. We're alive at a time right now where the rebalancing of the masculine and the feminine is creating a huge legislative swipe at the feminine, and anger from the masculine. The men in the bear movement is alive and well in this culture right now. Asking the question, would you feel safer with a bear or a man if you met him alone in the woods? And when women are saying, I think my chances are better with the bear, then so this individual journey for the feminine specifically, and I think humans in general, but for the feminine, it has an edge of putting other women out there instead of, wow, look at
mhm,
her living her best life. So it's a
mhm,
maturation.
mhm,
Somewhere in there, you got the wisdom to go, I'm not feeling jealous. I'm wanting that. And I think there's a lot of people walking around angry that others are so relaxed about this human story.
yeah,
Why aren't they fighting more? Why aren't they donating to my cause? Why, there's a lot of bullying going on right
mhm,
now.
yeah. Yeah. Yeah, well, it's sort of, it's the propaganda of fear and how we're taught to look at things. But even with, let's look at people who are famous, or, people who have, billions of dollars, and you could feel almost like this little tiny person sitting in your living room and saying, "Well, how did they do that?" or "How dare they get all that luck?" or whatever. But really, having no idea what it takes to hold that kind of wealth, right? Or to deal with relational things with that kind of wealth. I think it's just it's really important, and for me it was really empowering to not decide that anyone was different than me or
Right.
luckier than me. It was really about continuing to source and saying, if you want that, you could have it. And opening it up to this possibility, which then asks the deeper question, then who do
Right.
you need to be? What do you need
Yeah.
to learn? Where can you focus your energy? And is that really, truly
Yeah.
important to you? Right. And so it sort of shifts this thing to being separate from and and becoming one with all
Yeah.
possibility, and also recognizing that our soul's journey means we came here with a certain set of things, right? So I don't feel called to be a billionaire. It isn't my mission. It isn't something I've ever wanted. When I see someone who has it, I'm like, great, awesome,
Yeah.
let's chat. I can think of some ways, things to do with that, and or looking and saying, wow, you're doing a really great
Yeah.
job stewarding that, you know? Um,
So I want to put you in the moment where we first met and you were about to pack up your husband and your
mm,
children and put yourselves in an
yeah,
Airstream cocoon at the beginning of COVID. Like, what you started led us right up to that moment where you were ready to walk away from it all. It
yeah,
didn't matter where you lived, how you lived. It was that you wanted to be more connected to your intimates, to your yeah.
yes. Yeah, and it was actually right after COVID, because COVID was really the thing that brought it all. It was the shakeup
Yeah.
that was needed to really answer the call. And for COVID, I look at it as a time that we all got a bit
Yeah.
stiller. We all quieted down a bit, stopped with all of the distractions. If you were lucky and you weren't in the hospital working, and even if you were still working out in the world, there was still more quiet time at home, not as many parties, celebrations, birthdays, things to
The
do.
social
And so,
construct got a reset. Yeah.
totally. And for me, that time of quiet allowed me to really tell myself the truth, which is that I had a whole lot of things that I had wished were going on in my life that just weren't. I had wished for more connection with my family. I had wished for less time cleaning and taking care of all this stuff. I had wished for less stuff. Just so many things in our house and collection of things and more things. And I really started to see and asking myself, well, if I want to be more feminine, if I want to be more in flow, if I want to trust life more, what am I holding on to that I'm not willing
Uh,
to let go
uh,
of? And what I saw is I wasn't willing to let go of my career because it was my source of self confidence. I wasn't willing to let go of my house because it was a source of my feeling like I had made it. I wasn't willing to let go of my things because they were a source of trusting that whatever I needed, I would have, right? I wasn't able to let go of my kids going to school because then I would be more weird, more different, belong even less, and then be questioned from every angle whether I was messing
right.
them up or not. But also at the other side, so I looked at all the things that I was holding on to that had me stuck and
Yeah.
trapped. And then I looked at what I wanted. And I was like, if I could have anything, I would want to know that when I die, I have the deepest, richest relationship with my children that I could. I would want to know that I did everything I could to live in trust of my soul's calling. And I really can't do that when I am just deep into needing $15,000 a month just to pay for my bills. I can't talk to my soul very much
Right.
because there's not there's not time. I'm in survival, right? You gotta I got to get it done. I'm looking at debt, and I'm looking at um, all the times of getting the kids out the door to school and all these things. And I just thought, this isn't it.
Yeah.
This isn't it. I have this backyard. It's so beautiful. And people would come to our house and say, wow, look at, you guys have made it. This is gorgeous. And I'd say, yeah, but there's no food growing
Right.
here. There's no life here. It's beautiful aesthetically, but it isn't abundant, like in my version of what abundance was. And so we started asking ourselves, like, what would we want? You know, and first and foremost, I think, we came up with all the things we didn't want because we were very disconnected from what we would even want beyond that. Um, well, I think is so normal, and something that we all deal with. But the piece was, I I kept I noticed in my life that the times that I've been a yes, my body is sort of lit up. So I kept saying, I really don't know what I want. I know what I don't want, but let's start gauging like other realities of things that I would want, right? By my body. So it's like, what would be a spark of a yes? And so, we started deciding that we wanted to travel. And I thought, I really miss my family. Like, I'm going to tell myself the truth. I've lived here for 11 years. I miss my family. I promised myself that when I moved here, I would go see them once a year. And I have not done that. I miss birthday parties. I feel sadness, when I look at Facebook and they're having parties without me. And I thought, gosh, I remember listening to a call, my kids during Zoom, and listening to the teacher. And I'd always told myself, we're here for the kids. The kids, this is why we pay so much to live here, because the schools are amazing, the teachers are amazing, and they're getting a kind of education that I couldn't get. And I listened to the call and I thought, not sure that's true. It's not like I was judging the teacher. It just wasn't what I thought it was in my mind that I had made up, right? But as it's right here in my awareness, I realized that it isn't it. And so at the basis of it, we were like, what if we left? What if we just went on a trip and we bought a trailer and we just decided to travel the country and see where we might want to buy land? Like, where would we want to settle was our
Right.
whole conversation. And at the time we had a pizza business, a catering company, and we were both exhausted from it. And so we devised this plan to sell it, to get enough money to fund the land and to move. And so we had, a good plan. Um, and I remember how challenging it was. Like, when we had made the decision to do this, I still had months. It took us a year to get through all of the things, to sell all the things in our house and to make the decisions of what we were keeping, what we were letting go of. But I can remember just being in the backyard, and I don't remember why, but I was cleaning something outside with the hose and just pouring tears. And I was crying for the grief of recognizing that the life that I had built wasn't the life that I wanted
No.
anymore.
Mm.
And how deeply sad to get to that place, right? It's both exciting and
There's a
sad.
death of a
And I
story
think
there.
it is a death of a story, a death of a knowing, and then moving into the unknowing, how terrifying, right? But for me, the other thing I realized was that that specific time of answering that call of my soul was really teaching me that it's okay to say goodbye to things. Until that point in my life, I had only said goodbye when disaster struck,
Right. Right.
when terrible things happened to
Right.
show me, right? I had never chosen it
Right.
on my own. So it was like a whole new experience of holding, this is my life. It's pretty darn good, but I'm going to actually say it isn't what I want. And I'm going to step out here into the complete unknown to choose something different because I think, not even
I
know, I
feel
think it might
I
be better.
feel
I feel like it
yeah.
might be better. Um, and for me, the question that always has since inspired that is, what will I be the most proud of on
Yeah.
my deathbed? When I look back at my life and I say, you did that, like you did that. And I remember when we finally got our Airstream, we went to go pick it up. And I had a panic attack inside of it. I really did. We got in and I thought, "Oh my gosh, this is so small. There's no way I can live in here with 2 kids and a dog."
And my husband.
Right? And my husband, my big creative husband. Um, but we just kept taking
Yeah.
each step and trusting this. And whenever we're called in a certain direction, what I'm starting to see from that experience of really showing up in my life and in our lives for something that was greater than what we had, was that each time we do that, it's not like the end of the story. It's it was my soul calling me into something that was preparing me for
Right.
something else. And so really, looking at that trip on a spiritual level and that specific piece of my life, I wasn't okay anymore with staying stagnant and being in this sort of masculine driving life. I
Yeah.
knew that for sure, right? And so I had to dissolve all of that,
Yeah.
to shed that skin, to step into something else. And for me, what a wonderful way. Let's take all of the most precious things that we own and put them into one 250 square foot moving vessel and travel to places you've never been with your 2 kids, to trust that you are, how can you even educate them while you're on the road? And what does that even mean? And
We
I remember the first time we decided we were going to go to a hot springs. It was our first trip out. We rolled out. We're like, we're going to these hot springs in Bakersfield, California. We knew how far it was. And we're we're about an hour away. And we realize that we are going to have to drive these switchbacks on the side of a cliff to get there. And this is Jeremy's first time ever pulling a 55, foot rig. We didn't even know that the Airstream would follow that way. And so I'm literally white knuckling it. I'm like, "Oh my gosh, what did I do?" I know I was so excited about Bakersfield and these hot springs, and like I should have, looking back and my perfectionism's coming in, I should have looked at the GPS, and I don't even know, I don't know, do this is bad idea. And we made it. Um, and we didn't know how to park the Airstream. We didn't know how to, we got to this place where there was nowhere to turn around with that big of space. So we're like stuck on this giant mountain. Um, and I'm like, you know what? Let's just pull over, put our hazard lights on. I need a break. I need to go to the hot springs. So we pulled over what we could. Went to the hot springs and we went down, and of course, they're like cleaning the hot springs. So we're like, well, this is shit. We're supposed to be having this
Where's
great
my
time.
Instagram photo? Where's my
Yeah, what
moment?
the heck, right? Already not looking good, I'm thinking. But as it goes, everything was in
Perfect.
its most
Yeah.
beautiful perfection, because we ended up talking to people that were volunteers cleaning it. The kids got excited. They started cleaning everything out. They got this. It was one of their most
Right.
precious memories. And then they filled them back up and we got clean hot springs. So that was even better. But then we found some people that understood how to turn the Airstream around. And it really, all of these moments of traveling through the
Right.
unknown showed me that I can
Yeah.
trust life. I can not only trust myself, because when you're constantly making choices at every moment about where you're going to stay, what you're going to do, looking at websites, you get really, really good at honing in on your intuition
Right.
about a place. So that change of going from knowing to not knowing, actually had me hone in on the very feminine qualities that I
Yeah.
wanted to enhance. I had no idea that was going
Yeah.
to be the thing. But my soul, yes,
Right.
knew, and it was taking me on this trajectory of, as a family unit, learning how to live together in a small space, how to honor each other's differences, how to communicate more clearly, and also how to, um, one of my favorite patterns before the Airstream was avoidance. So if there was ever a kind of an issue or trouble in my relationship, I would just avoid it as long as I could. And in an Airstream, you cannot avoid anything. It is whatever it is right in your face. It was a great
Oh,
practice of
absolutely.
tending to. So this very, very, very smart soul of mine
Mhm.
knew that this was going to be the most wonderful training ground for the aspects that I really, really wanted. And I had said to myself, in my marriage, one of the things Jeremy and I were really working on is our intimacy. And in our intimacy and time I was always, whenever we would go to the bedroom, I would have a checklist of all the to dos in my head. And so when we're actually could be physically having an act of making love, and here I am thinking of all the things I need to do. And I thought, if I'm not in that masculine pushing mode, then I can be present here. Like I might really enjoy
Wow.
this, right? And so part of that piece of looking at all these areas in my life that I wasn't as satisfied with, wanted to change, I knew that at the root of them were all learning how to be in this
Yeah.
feminine flow and trust
Yeah.
and softness, right? And so, in that place of really looking, we were in the Airstream, and there's not as much to do, there's not as much cleaning, there's not as many bills, we have less stuff to manage. And yet I still found myself, for the first few months in that place of like coming together to make love, and I still have the list, and I'm like, well shit, I changed everything. This list is
Right.
still here. How do I get more present? And so the point of my story here is like, there was a place where there were no longer these sort of external things. And I had to then really, really focus internally on myself and relaxing myself and learning how to do that. Um, because it's one thing to take out the external things that are causing
Right.
misalignment. But then there's the other piece is that there may still be, even with those external things, there are likely still internal stories and
Uh,
patterns that have to be tended
till the
to.
day we die.
Um, till the
That's
day
the
we die.
path of
Yeah,
self-competence is
absolutely.
we're never fully done. We're always but
Yeah.
we experience the field around us with gratitude and curiosity rather than feeling threatened or I do get overwhelmed some days, and that's also a teacher. Oh, I'm overwhelmed. What does that
Yeah.
say about my other choices? So I can't manage this one.
hmm Yeah. And the piece too, I think that is important because whenever we make a big change like this, the mind always wants to
Right.
know how it's going to go.
That's
Right. And,
fear.
you
That's
know,
the survival. We've been
totally.
in that mode since the beginning of time.
Yeah.
And we had to
Yeah.
lean into our masculine traits to keep the survival thing
Mhm.
um, going for us. And now we don't have to do that. In
Yeah.
fact, survival is demanding of us a different equation towards thriving with this planet that I think is a
Yeah.
very feminine move. Uh,
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I still lean on the side of my dad taught me when I was growing up to make an educated guess, right? And so I still like a
yeah,
bit of safety. I was like, okay, let's have so much savings so we can make it through this piece. Although I don't know that we need that. It was for me what made me feel safe. And um, but then
I met you
you
at
meet the
that moment
moment.
when you were loading up and you had your business
Mm,
sold. And at the last
hmm
minute, all of your economic plans for giving you the freedom to go on this Airstream adventure, this cocoon, fell apart because the people had backed out.
Yeah,
They decided they didn't want a
yeah,
pizza business lifestyle. And that's fair. But I
Yep.
remember the two of you standing in your kitchen like, we were going for this. We can't let that economic um, fail safe be the yes or no of this cocoon movement that we're
Yeah.
stepping into. And so I saw you move at a higher level of faith and trust in that moment. And I think I even stood in your
Mhm.
kitchen and said, "Life is happening for you. There's a message in this. Keep
Yeah.
trusting
Yeah.
this, um, and keep listening to that beckoning and the becoming of who we are is it is such a beautiful echo of our higher self, just always finding its way back into the moment with us. And there is a reckoning in that beckoning. It's not always easy. There are
Mm.
some really hard choices that we have to make along the way. Sometimes, I think about some of the kids that are making no contact with their parents right now. There's a disruption between the old story and the new story. This reckoning in the beckoning of who we're becoming is messy and hard, and as is
Yeah.
birthing a new anything new. It's um and we know how to birth shit. The feminine knows how to get through the unknown. The first time a human passed through my vagina was was a novel moment. Like, I've been in denial as my belly kept getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And then it was like, oh, this has a finale to it that I'm not sure I'm ready for. But yet, on the other side of that finale, that
Mhm.
crescendo moment, that energetic
Mhm.
primal release, uh,
Mhm.
there's beauty. And it's
Mhm.
my theory of the case, my big toe, my big theory of everything, that this rise of primal pain and awareness that we just can't keep going like this, and a helplessness that comes along with that realization, um, takes us in one of two directions. It takes you in the direction that you went, which is, this isn't working. I have some agency to choose something different. I'm going for it. Versus, this isn't working and I'm going to continue to rage against the machine rather than take
Mhm.
responsibility for my experience of the machine,
Mhm.
the
Mhm.
script, the conditioning, the story, the narrative, the status quo.
Mhm.
Uh, to meet our own status quo with enoughness is big work.
Yeah, absolutely. And I really do think that, when I look back at what did I have to learn to even be willing, it was this great distinction in landmark education, which is that you are winning the game
Yeah,
you're playing. And at the time, I really didn't understand it, but it was you're
yeah,
creating your life. What you look at, what you see around you is a reflection of your inner
right,
consciousness. And that doesn't mean it's your fault or you're blaming yourself, but it's if you want a different out picturing, and a different feeling as well, because it's not just
right.
about material out picturing of things. It's about looking at that piece, And there were, on the Airstream journey, just as one example, there were a lot of like dark seated beliefs that I had to let go of. I remember being, like we were staying somewhere. The two were, I'm going to mess my kids up. I mean, I can't tell you the first year how many people questioned me on homeschooling and those kind of things. And um, but every time I get that much questioning in my life, now I realize it's because I need to figure out how to believe it. So all the questions are really me questioning it and the out picturing of that coming and saying, what are you going to say, Angelina? How are you going to deal with this? Are you okay with it? And as soon as I got crystal clear that I'm good with this,
That's
the
right.
questions stopped,
That's right.
right? So it's that piece of looking and doing that deeper analysis, that deeper work and deeper reflection to become clear on
And can
something.
I offer
Um,
to have enough trust in yourself that even when you second guess yourself and what you're doing, that's an okay, healthy thing to do. This isn't about make a
Mhm.
choice and run with it. Now,
No.
what I don't do is gaslight myself, but I will question
Mhm.
myself
Mhm.
all the time because I
Mhm.
get deeper and deeper layers of congruency out of that. Like,
Mhm.
oh, you're right. I am kind of operating out of integrity with myself. Thank you for and so this inter
Yeah.
I worked with a brother this last week whose son is acting out in a very violent way. And I said, oh, he doesn't have any interiority, doesn't have connection
Mm.
with his higher self. Therefore, he has no empathy, no connection with the world around him. It starts with this, and it's a messy path. It isn't always clear what congruence looks like because we have to filter out all of the ways that other people have had held our congruency at a hostage level from our childhood, right?
Yeah.
I think
Mhm.
my first primal scream was when I was 3 years old, and I stood looked at my parents and said, "Who are the grown-ups in the room? Where are the grown-ups in the room?"
Well,
And I would put back in my little
like,
place so harsh and
mm,
so firmly that "Ooh, there are no grown-ups in the room. I guess I'm gonna have to figure this out on my own." And I'm grateful
mm,
for that now, so
mhm,
grateful, but at the time, it felt like I was really isolated and alone. I think there are a lot of people who
mm,
are feeling that isolation from the old story that
mhm,
doesn't work for them anymore, but they don't yet trust. Coming on the other side
mhm,
of that cocoon period can last decades.
mhm, mhm,
I feel like I've come out of one layer of cocoon. Maybe maybe there's I love your story about the farmer and the chrysalis. There is no helping anybody else out of their cocoon. Only they can fully
mm,
emerge and practice the wings for a while and dry off their wings before they're really ready to fly. There's no shortcutting your
yeah.
process. You
Th- There isn't, and I do believe that like we have to
yeah,
seek role models and examples, and to for me that those years of like doing different courses and programs and people, you know, going to Tony Robbins and doing meditations and all these things, it was really teaching me how to reflect, but also I always love to think about the difference between when we're in a monologue and we are just
yeah,
recycling the same
yes,
stories to ourselves and when we're in
yeah,
a dialogue. And the dialogue opens something up, which is that you're you hear yourself share these stories and writing it down or even, being in a session with you or something where when you're speaking that and being witnessed, not the farmer watching and looking and like taking awe in, not doing anything even except for just watching,
yeah,
holding the space that then, and maybe even sharing a few other ways of looking at it, that language, it begins to be a real dialogue. And that's when the shifts happen. Whether that's a dialogue with spirit in a meditation, whether that's a dialogue with you journaling, with yourself, outside of yourself, whether that's a conversation that you and I have, or, healing and, hiring an astrologer to do it doesn't matter what it is, the seeking of
yeah,
dialogue, of bringing this inner feeling, story, words, trauma, joy, bringing it
yes,
out into the world is really what it's about. I mean, that's what this podcast is for,
yeah,
right? We're creating a dialogue of something. We're expanding it into not just
yeah.
our awareness, but hopefully anyone who's watching it and whoever's looking, like they're having a dialogue with this different way of thinking and
I
looking at something. And it really for me is something
I
so,
I
so
l
important.
It's a great finishing point for us in this conversation. I've met so many people that are, eh, avoiding their primal scream. They're doing everything they
mhm,
can to avoid it. Like, I got all the plates spinning. I can keep this thing going, and I'm exhausted. But if I let go of one plate, everything's gonna crumble. Like there is
Yeah.
this sense that if I stop the treadmill and try and get off, that I will never have enough around me again. I'll never when I walked away from a big income on stage for 30 years, and I was like, but the internal dialogue was, I am abundance. I am abundance. It's not what I do in this one iteration that creates abundance. No, I am abundance and I will figure it out one way.
Mm.
And I have all these years. The
Mhm.
universe just said, oh, here's, you just keep staying in alignment and
Mhm.
it's gonna be okay. It's gonna be okay. And
Mhm.
there's so many people that are afraid to let go of the old story right now. In fact, I think we're gonna see a huge crescendo of certainty. Um, is it, call it November of this year. Um,
Mm.
and no matter what you believe is the right next thing to happen for this country, the next thing is going to happen. And what we choose to do with it is where we
Mhm.
claim some agency back from fear. This
Mhm.
ratcheting up of fear is it's the avoidance of the primal
Yeah.
scream that we're ready to have. We're done with the old story.
Yeah.
And if you come from a very far right lens or a far left lens or a center lens, we're all done with it. There is a collective scream rising on this planet right
Mhm.
now and from the planet right now. So
Yeah.
it's good timing for these conversations to happen because I think it is important to be witnessed and to make ourselves witnessable, to own our journey out loud so that people go, "Oh, I'm not crazy and I'm not alone. I'm not the only one who's feeling this way."
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, now I'm starting to look at it and say, you know what? I'm either gonna choose it on my own or it's just gonna burn down and I'm gonna have to stand in it. But no matter what, the cycle of life always includes
Yeah.
fire and burning and moving away what no longer serves. And it's either going to be, it's never comfortable, but it's either going to be really uncomfortable or you're going to have a bit of sense about, oh, I can see why this is happening. I can choose this with more empowerment and more
Yeah.
grace, um,
And
rather
we
than
can get
fighting.
through this if we come together.
Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
absolutely. Yeah,
Well, I
absolutely.
appreciate you. Thanks for showing up in such a
Mm.
willingness of vulnerability and wisdom. And I know that it's funny the work that you did for so long in front of so many people on your big stage experience and mine too. I thought I was all done with that. And yet it's
Mm.
no, that was just one more skill. That's just one more thing that wherever this path takes me, these big conversations, I'm okay. I know how to have these big conversations with lots of
Mhm.
people. Um,
Mhm.
it's
Mhm.
everything's perfect. I am no.
Yeah, and answering that soul piece, even when it doesn't feel like it
Yeah,
makes sense. Um, I think that's what's becoming so fun, and I love also witnessing other people like you who are, having these clear knowings and idea, and on one hand, it makes no sense, and on the other hand, it doesn't matter if it makes sense because it
yeah,
will make sense as it continues to unfold, and that is the feminine. The feminine says, you
that's
don't
right.
have to know. Just
Yeah,
trust me. And the fun becomes the ride of
yeah,
figuring it out. So now instead of being afraid of the future, when you're really, really
right.
standing in the feminine, I'm looking out at the future and so much curiosity
Yeah,
and excitement. And I'm like, oh, what's it going to be like? Because I know it's going to be way better even than this moment.
absolutely.
Right? Because it
That,
keeps getting better and it keeps getting clear
yeah,
and alignment keeps showing more alignment. And so, you know, just for anyone who's like, ooh, this feminine thing sounds fun, but also terrifying. Now the flip of going through that part has me really
Yeah.
seeing the truth. Not the illusion is
Yeah.
that it's scary. The truth is that it's more exciting and life filled and
And
joy filled.
interesting. It
Um,
keeps this old story is
Interesting.
boring. The one where we keep killing each other,
Yeah.
we keep hurting each other.
Yeah.
That's boring. Aren't we tired of that story? I-
Keep going on the hamster wheel to just like make money to go buy cheese and
And
make
we
more money to
watch
buy
people
cheese.
burn
It's
out,
like,
and the number of people that are on mood stabilizing medicines right now because the external chaos is overwhelming. I mean, there is a crescendo
yeah,
coming. There is a we cannot do
yeah,
this. This is no longer a life affirming construct. And we
yeah,
will choose, and some will choose sooner than later, and some will be at the death's door of their story before they finally choose to surrender to a new story.
yeah,
And then
yeah,
we'll all go, gosh, we could have had a V8. We could have done this 1,000 years ago and not been, but we needed to learn all this. We needed to master all
yeah.
aspects of love, including the lack thereof, to come to this
Hmm.
moment and choose a love story. You chose your
Yeah,
love story. Every day you are choosing your love story, loving you, loving your life, loving your family. That we have to choose the love story. That's the only ask of this human
yeah,
experience, is that we choose it,
yeah,
not be a victim
yeah,
to it.
yeah. And I absolutely. And I think, well, I want to end with one last piece that you'd asked this question of like, what do
Yeah.
you see for the future? Like, what is so important to you? And I think on the heels of everything we've talked about, the thing, our last time together, you had shared this vision of this
Love,
light beam,
love,
and it's
love.
really been coming to life for me. But what it's come to mean is that the most important thing of our healing is to shed the parts of us that are not
Right.
truly us, so that we can each come into an understanding of the truth of our soul spark, like our unique gifts. And instead of living the paradigm of fear and comparison and trying to be like each other or to stay separate from each other, it's like, no, like, what if we all became these amazing laser light beams that were so unique to us, and that we were using our gifts and our medicine, our words, our voice, our vibration. Just, even when I'm doing the dishes, I'm that
Yeah.
laser light beam, right? But imagine that all
Right.
humans were lit in that way
Yeah.
and were clear on their unique gifts. It'd be a whole lot easier to find who's who to do what, right? But also this
Exactly.
unity
You
of
know?
that, and I think that there's a way in which when I look at life and I look at all of us of being connected to the
Yeah.
one heartbeat, is that anytime I see pain or suffering in other people, I turn and I say, what part of that
Yeah.
exists in me? What is it that I could be deepening with, that fierce anger and rage or just anything? It's also like there are times that now I can see it and I can see all that. I can feel that pain. I can be with that. And even in that ability to understand the deep pain and rage has us become more of this whole, this unity. So that light beam thing has really been getting me excited about how do we support more
Yes.
people in understanding their specific soul's gifts and getting rid of all the other, just having them stand in that fully and to really like behold their
Yeah.
magnificence. Just like every single person is so incredibly
And
beautiful.
you
And
and this is the journey, right? That we come into this world through a dark tunnel into the light. We spend
mm,
our life, hopefully, meeting that light from within. And then as we become more clear about our light, it becomes less of a diffused light source, but a more focused, focused, focused light, so that we become a laser
Mm,
beam of healing in our unique
mm,
way. And everybody shows up, not just diffused light, but also laser focused light on the area, the code that we're here to deliver. Like you
mm,
have codes, I have
mm,
codes. Everybody has some
mm,
aspect of themselves, even
mm,
even and especially if it's just the recognition of their own path, that they can be a wounded healer and help others move through their
mm,
shedding of skins, moving through their cocooning periods, moving through their expansion of wings periods, moving through their flight and launch periods. Like these are messy uh, places that we go
mm,
to, and
mm,
we expect to get it right the first time. We are not. This is a life
mm,
journey to continually
mhm.
refocus on our light in a way that brings more light to everything around us.
Yeah, yeah, because we just highlighted these sort of pinnacle moments, but we didn't talk about all the things that lead up
Right.
to the pinnacle moment, which is generally a
Oh,
bunch of frustration, of looking and saying, this doesn't feel good, of feeling the
right.
not feeling good, of feeling resentment, or all of the lower vibrational emotions, which are really important to show us we're not
That's
actually
right.
in
That's right.
alignment, right? So we didn't talk about
No,
that,
and
but
I feel
that
like
definitely
a
is a
second
part of this
conversation is
because
warranted here.
yes, yes.
I lost you, Angelina. We crashed. Are you there? Wow, we lost
Ah,
that. We'll have to do some editing here. Um, what I would just want to wrap this beauty in is there is a process that is noble, that is, I won't say predictable. eh, the outcomes are not predictable, but the elements of the process can be sort of universal. Like there's frustration, there's fear, there's a feeling of a total loss of identity, there's a feeling of of oh, the self betrayal, the grieving that comes in all
mm,
the ways, all the years wasted. It feels wasted. It in the first blush of this awareness, oh my God, I could have been
mm,
so much more in my 20s and 30s and 40s, but shit, I wouldn't have had all this wisdom to bring to this moment. I wouldn't change a thing. I wouldn't
mm,
change a thing about my life. So at 65, I'm figuring some shit out that's yummy. Thank God I did it before I died. I think it's you just want to reach a point in your life where you're willing to take 100% responsibility for your experience of it, and then everything after that is just a total bonus. It's a total
mhm,
bonus. And so grateful to have met this part of myself before I died. Like to fully consent to my human experience is whether it happens on the last day of my life or the first day of my life, just that it happened is
mhm.
a life worth living. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah, and it's just what meeting the next thing.
Yeah.
What's next? Where
And then
what's
they
next?
say, find the others. You're one of my others. It's somebody
Mm,
else who's knows the hard stuff so that when I'm going through hard stuff, you can go, oh, right. Remember how we did this? See, we've been through this before. And I think the hard stuff now is
yeah,
we go through this together. We walk each other home. And I'm just so grateful that
yeah.
we're on the
Me
path,
too.
sister, together. Thank you.
I have learned so much from you and continue
Likewise.
to. So I adore you and thank you for this time today because I don't really reflect like this, in this big swoop. So as I was just thinking about it, I was like, wow, you really have, you've gone from a place of real darkness and you now do know how to follow your soul's call. So it was really great remembering and reclaiming of that for me too. So thank you
You're
for this
welcome.
time.
This is my honor.
Yeah.
to be continued.
Mhm.
Thanks, sister.
All right. All right. Bye, everyone.
Thank you for joining us for the Primal Scream podcast. We appreciate your willingness to sit in the pain and exploration of a fellow human. It is our hope that you found a thread that you can weave into your own story going forward. There is great beauty on the other side of the primal scream. A wise elder once said, "We are the ones we've been waiting for." And we are not waiting any longer for someone or something to shift the human story from fear to love. It's on us to redeem ourselves from our individual and collective unconsciousness, to find our ease of beingness. The future belongs to those who show up. We'll leave you with the song Like the Children Do by Meredith McHenry. She reminds us that the way home is the path of innocence reclaimed. See you on the next podcast. Have a beautiful day. Put down your armor, I'll put mine down too. We'll do like the children know how to do. We'll fill up a pail with the pain they caused you. We'll pour it all out like the children do. Don't get me wrong, you can't walk over me. But I'm strong enough to hold you when you're weak. I know I fucked up and you sure have too. So let's just start over like children do. Can we just go back to the time before our innocence was stolen? I don't know how to get us there, but I'll keep hoping. I'll keep hoping to do like the children do. We can do like the children do. I'll open my bleeding heart to you. Let's just pretend for a minute or two that our hearts can bend without shattering through. We'll find that forgiveness as if we're brand new. And you'll walk through the fire like it can't burn you. Can we just go back to the time before our innocence was stolen? I don't know how to get us there, but I'll keep trying. I'll keep trying to do like the children do. We can do like the children do. I'll open my filthy hands to you.
Can't we do like the children do? Can't we do like the children do? 'Cause I don't want to say goodbye to you. Put down your armor, I'll put mine down too.